You know that feeling when the economy is good, and you definitely know the feeling when it's bad. But what if those booms and busts aren't some natural rhythm? What if they're actually caused by a series of random, unpredictable jolts? Well, today we're going on a kind of detective hunt for the hidden shocks that might just be secretly running our economy. So, have you ever just stopped and wondered why our economy seems to move in these giant waves, swinging between periods of growth and then recession? I mean, it really feels like there's a pattern there, right? A predictable rhythm to it all. But the really fascinating part is that pattern might just be an illusion. Almost a century ago, a statistician named Eugene Slutsky had this absolutely groundbreaking insight. He showed that if you just add up a series of purely random events, you can create these surprisingly regular, predictable-looking waves. This idea completely changed economics. It kicked off this massive search for the random causes or shocks that are really driving things behind the scenes. Okay, but finding these shocks, it is incredibly difficult. It's not as simple as just watching the numbers go up and down. And the reason why is because of this fundamental chicken and egg problem that sits right at the heart of macroeconomics. So, let's look at the core challenge right here. Imagine the central bank raises interest rates, and then a little while later, the economy slows down. The big question is, did the rate hike cause the slowdown, or was the bank just reacting to a slowdown it already saw coming? You see, one is just a predictable policy move, but the other, that's a genuine economic shock. And telling them apart, well, that's the whole game for economists. Right. So, to really understand what causes what, economists have to somehow isolate these true shocks. They're looking for events that are, one, primitive, meaning they're the root cause, and two, exogenous, meaning they come from outside the normal flow of the economy. In short, they're hunting for the genuinely unanticipated curveballs that life throws at us. So, how in the world do you solve a puzzle like this? Well, it turns out economists have developed some incredibly clever detective tools to hunt for these elusive shocks and, hopefully, finally isolate their effects. We're going to look at three really different approaches they use. It's best to think of them as different ways of looking for the fingerprints of a true economic shock, and each one has its own unique logic and its own assumptions. The first tool is all about timing. It basically works by assuming a delay. For instance, an economist might assume that government spending for a quarter is already locked in, and it just can't instantly change in response to a sudden spike in GDP within that same quarter. It's this sluggishness that helps them separate the action from the reaction. Now, the second tool is pure detective work. This involves literally digging through historical records, reading the actual minutes from Federal Reserve meetings, or the legislative debates behind a tax cut, all to understand the why behind a decision. The whole point is to separate a policy change made because of the economy from one made for, say, other random political reasons. And then there's a more modern approach that gets even more granular. Instead of looking at monthly data, these economists zoom in on the exact minutes and hours right after a policy announcement. By watching how financial markets react in real time, they can precisely measure the exact part of that announcement that was a complete and total surprise. So, what happens when we apply these different detective tools to one of the most studied questions in all of economics? What is the actual impact of a central bank's interest rate decision? And this is where it gets absolutely wild. The tools, they don't agree. I mean, not even close. Depending on which detective kit you use, the timing one, the narrative one, or the high-frequency data, the estimated impact of a surprise 1% rate hike is completely different. One method says the effect is small, another says it's massive. They can't all be right. This whole investigation also uncovers these famous paradoxes, like the price puzzle. This is this bizarre finding where a policy move designed to lower inflation, like hiking interest rates, sometimes seems to do the exact opposite, at least at first. It is a perfect example of just how tricky this whole identification problem really is. Now, I know this might sound like a fascinating academic debate, and it is, but figuring out which of these tools is giving us the right answer has massive, real-world consequences for every single one of us. See, getting this right determines how much power we think policymakers actually have. Are they skillfully steering the economic ship through rough seas? Or are they just reacting to giant waves they can't possibly control? The answer to that question depends entirely on correctly identifying the cause and effect of their actions. And while this puzzle isn't fully solved, the progress here is just undeniable.
Thanks to these increasingly sophisticated methods, the toolkit for understanding our economy is way more powerful and precise than it has ever been before.
So this leaves us with a final, kind of provocative thought. What's the ultimate endgame of all this economic detective work? I mean, if we can get good enough at identifying the specific random shocks that trigger recessions, does that mean we might one day be able to predict and perhaps even prevent them altogether?